Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin in Ottawa, where Mark Carney's Liberal government held a press conference on Thursday to give an update on the wildfire situation. But media questions quickly turned to the government's controversial Bill C-5 and why the Liberals are determined to ram the legislation through Parliament before the House of Commons rises for summer break. APTN's Fraser Needham reports.
Energy and Natural Resources Minister Tim Hodgson opened the press conference with an announcement of more funds to fight wildfires.
I'm proud to announce a federal, territorial, provincial investment of approximately $104 million through the Fire Smart program. This represents over $94 million in joint investments from the governments of Canada, British Columbia, Alberta, Newfoundland and Labrador, Manitoba, the Yukon, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island.
But Hodgson was soon forced to answer a number of questions about why the government will not allow its new economic development legislation to be studied at committee before reaching third reading. Hodgson simply said extreme times call for extreme measures.
We're in a very difficult situation right now. We have a trade war. We have a trade war that is affecting sector after sector after sector. Canadian jobs are at risk. Canadians' livelihoods are at risk, and quite frankly, the prosperity of the country is at risk.
But at another press conference outside the House of Commons at almost exactly the same time, NDP's Leah Gazan wasn't buying any of it.
Bill C-5 is not the way to get it done. It provides ministers and cabinet with massive, unprecedented government overreach to make decisions on what they feel is nation-building project, usurping constitutional obligations, usurping rights contained in Section 35 of the Constitution.
The proposed legislation will do a number of things, including streamlining the approval process for energy pipelines through one office and reducing the time to do this from 5 to 2 years. But organizations like the Assembly of First Nations say things are moving too fast and they need more time to do proper consultations. Hodgson was asked why not wait a few more months and let Bill C-5 proceed at a normal pace through Parliament.
You should ask that to all the auto workers who are losing their jobs, to all the aluminum workers who are losing their jobs, to all the steel workers who are losing their jobs, to all the forestry products people in small towns across the country who are losing their jobs. Every day our economy is being attacked. Every day we are losing jobs. We need to fight for those people. We need to move.
The Prime Minister says he would like to see the legislation passed into law no later than early next month. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
To the fire situation now, and as fire crews continue to fight wildfires in northern Saskatchewan, their efforts are showing progress. Some evacuees are getting ready to return home. La Ronge is welcoming residents back. Although the fires no longer pose an immediate threat, residents know that returning home will involve intense cleanup and lost business. Video journalist Rachel May spoke with 2 La Ronge residents who've already returned.
And the knock on the door was so loud, and so I opened the door and there's a cop standing there. We have to leave in 10 minutes.
Bernadette Yuya describes the moment she had 10 minutes to gather her 5 children, bring her dog to a safe location in La Ronge, and board a bus to leave her home. She says it was right next to the bush where fires were spreading quickly. She left with just her purse, a bottle of water, and the clothes on her back. Yuya and her children had been staying at Sturgeon Lake First Nation during the evacuation. On Thursday, they returned to a home not damaged by the fire, except for soot and ash debris outside. Yuya says she is happy to be home, but thankful for the generosity of Sturgeon Lake.
These people are amazing. They treat us well and with respect and love, and they took care of us.
Although her family and others were well taken care of during their stay, she stressed the government needs to consider families when evacuating communities.
Us women, we need space, not the community hall with our 5 little ones, 5 2-year-olds, 1-year-old and crawling. Unacceptable.
But it's not just families affected by evacuations. At a press conference on Wednesday, La Ronge Chamber of Commerce President Matthew Maurer said that being shut down for even 7 days has had a devastating impact on La Ronge's economy.
We've had this happen before in 2015, and the people remember what happened. Businesses had to go into debt, unnecessary debt. We had lost, wasted inventory, and some businesses weren't ever able to recover from it.
He said that as evacuees return to the community, they will still be facing the impacts the evacuation has had on La Ronge.
So people are starting to return to the community now, but we have our grocery stores that have no food and need to restock. We have business owners who stuck around to be providing those essential services, and they're burnt out, they're exhausted, and they need to rest now.
APTN News asked about the potential impact on tourism in La Ronge. Maurer replied that businesses in northern areas will likely be facing losses during their busiest months.
Quiet, because even if the fires are not an immediate threat to the community right now, people still have that anxiety, they still have that fear, and they maybe have rescheduled their plans, or they've made other plans because they weren't sure what's going to happen in the north.
Maurer hopes the government of Saskatchewan provides some level of financial relief to small businesses that are rebuilding. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Manitoba's Minister of Infrastructure and Transportation revealed today that this year's wildfire evacuation is now considered the largest domestic air operation in Canadian military history, and providing the following information for evacuees to counter conflicting information being shared on social media.
So I want to clarify that evacuees do not need to travel to Winnipeg to verify their identity to receive financial support through the Canadian Red Cross. The Red Cross is validating evacuees' information without requiring travel through local in-person meetings and through phone interviews. The province has been flowing aid to residents of municipalities and Northern Affairs communities, and Indigenous Services Canada with MKO is responsible for issuing federal aid to support First Nations community members in Manitoba.
Some wildfire evacuees in Manitoba say they're receiving fraudulent text messages and calls from scammers pretending to provide disaster relief. The Canadian Red Cross wants everyone to be cautious of unsolicited requests for payment or personal information from fraudsters impersonating them. Sav Jonesa has more.
Even during a time of crisis, scam artists never take a break. Some wildfire evacuees in Manitoba are being targeted by fraudsters pretending to be the Canadian Red Cross.
We've received reports of that, and we're asking Manitobans to ensure that they're responding to official communications through the Red Cross. Don't provide your information to third parties or anything that's unvalidated. And a good way to verify that is to go to MB Ready or the Red Cross website directly.
Text messages, phone calls, and possibly even emails are going out to unsuspecting Manitobans displaced by wildfires. They promise financial aid to many who are desperately waiting for it. But the result may be costly as scammers demand banking information, social insurance numbers, and even an initial payment. The Canadian Red Cross says those requests are red flags. Individuals eligible for financial assistance will not need to provide their social insurance number, bank account information, or credit card number during their registration or to receive assistance. In addition, the Red Cross will not ask for any form of payment in order to receive assistance. More than 20,000 wildfire evacuees are registered with the Canadian Red Cross in Manitoba. It's in charge of dispensing daily stipends on behalf of the province so that people can continue to pay their bills and make ends meet during a time when many are out of work. Though Manitobans have taken to social media to show off the fraudulent messages, so far Manitoba RCMP have received no reports from people affected. They remind people that if you feel uncomfortable or suspicious, hang up, delete the email, or simply ignore the request. Don't feel pressured to make any decisions and never send money. It seems like Manitoba isn't the only province being impacted by scammers. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe had this to say.
taking advantage of people in what is an extremely vulnerable situation where they and their family have been displaced from their home, often had to travel halfway across the province, hours and hours in the dead of night. For someone to take advantage of a family that is in that situation, hell hath no place hot enough for them.
The Canadian Red Cross says to contact local authorities if you suspect someone is trying to scam you. Sav Jones, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, Av. A new poll has found a majority of Canadians disagree with the idea that they live on stolen Indigenous lands. That's the topic for our Truth in Politics panel this week. Jennifer and Negon will be here to weigh in after the break. Welcome back. A new poll conducted for the Association of Canadian Studies has found a majority of Canadians reject the idea that they live on stolen Indigenous lands. However, when it comes to the youth, 1 in 2 students believe they do live on stolen land. That's the topic for our Truth in Politics panel this week. Jennifer Leywitz is the CEO of Pasqua Strategies, and Negon Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Negon, great to see you. Happy Thursday to you. Jennifer, we'll start with you and your thoughts on this new poll finding a majority of Canadians do not believe they live on stolen Indigenous lands.
Oh, I think that I don't know who commissioned the poll. I was actually just reading it this morning and I saw it on the National Post website. So I'm not entirely sure how the questions were framed within that poll to solicit the answers that they did get. But I think it's really interesting to see the generational divide and also how defensive people are getting over that term. And I almost ask people, why are you defensive over that term? Like, what is it about the term stolen that bothers you so much? Because in the reality, the harm that's been caused to First Nations people far outweighs the offense and defensiveness that we should have, rather than, non-Indigenous people being, maybe a little offended over the word stolen. But I think it's also, important to look at the historical context of what would lead us to even say that happened. And people need to recognize that historically, broken treaties and our land, being taken from us. And not only that, the total desire to erase our nations in their entirety to begin with. So I think, when we're talking about a poll on whether or not people feel that it's stolen land, I think there's too many moving parts to have people understand whether or not they fully grasp the historical context of what stolen land actually means.
Right. Negon, Alberta and Quebec are leading the way with that mindset. 69% of those polled in the city of Calgary do not believe they live on stolen lands. Are those numbers a surprise in those areas?
Well, I mean, those are two very staunch, at times pro-sovereignty provinces. These are provinces that have a very vexed relationship with Confederation. Alberta for the purposes of energy and money, Quebec for the purposes of French language and culture. And so what happens in those scenarios in which very strong local regionality or provinciality politics exist is all the other air gets sucked out of the room. And so what ends up happening is that most of the population doesn't talk about the historical facts of Confederation, of Canada. They end up talking about more local focused history, tradition, for example. And so I'm not surprised at all that in Alberta and Quebec that there is an ignorance around Confederation, what actually happened in the treaties, which was lands were stolen. But on top of that, I mean, this study was commissioned by the issue of out in British Columbia of professors who are questioning the validity of whether British Columbia is unceded territory, that there is a winner-take-all kind of environment in which the British just simply dominate, claim everything, take it all. And so there's that's a very vexed situation in British Columbia as well. One other thing that's important about this study is it's very built on age lines. The older that you get, the more that you think that stolen lands aren't occurring. But the younger that you are, the more that you understand that the land is stolen. That tells you that we're raising the most competent generation in history, and that people who don't understand Canadian history are just going the way of the dodo bird.
Yeah, Jennifer, what do you make of the significant generational divide that so many students believe that they do, in fact, live on stolen Indigenous lands?
I don't think it's an accident that the more that we see, history being taught more inclusively in our education systems, that it's an accident that we're seeing younger and younger generations starting to really understand the historical, wrongdoings by the government of Canada and essentially what has happened to us as First Nations people. I think education is essential, but I also think not forgetting. I think that there's a lot of people that get uncomfortable with the term stolen because they start reflecting that inwards and saying, well, how could you say that me or my ancestors stole something from you? But I think it's really important to almost acknowledge that it's not that we're denying that happened, but maybe you need to start just being full of discomfort in your feelings in order to acknowledge it, and getting past that stage of denial and sitting with that discomfort. But I think the education piece is huge amongst our generations. I think that's one of the biggest pieces. I remember seeing a study a long time ago that was talking about how even people that are immigrating to Canada, if there isn't an education piece on the history of First Nations, Inuit, Métis people, it actually doesn't take them very long to start adopting those same stereotypes towards us. And it's becoming increasingly more obvious that that's continuing to happen. And then the degrading of, our women and how that's even tied to missing and murdered Indigenous women and the devaluing of us as human beings. So I think it's important for us to start breaking down that discomfort and educating. And that is why we build things like that into curriculum, and we have cultural awareness training, and we make sure that people around us are educated in the history. But I think people are uncomfortable with the fact that just because time has passed, it does not automatically equate to an apology or the erasing of the wrongdoing. And this is something that we should be looking at further in how other areas around the world have handled this after conflict. Even with the Holocaust, I remember watching a documentary on Netflix about this, how they consistently always educate, and the history is there. And I remember this Netflix documentary was even showing like the signs that were on street poles. So it's like never again. Like, in order for us not to repeat something, we need to remember that it happened and make sure that we never allow it to happen again.
And Egon, the study was conducted for the Montreal-based Association for Canadian Studies, and they say the findings show a deeper divide in how people view Canada's history. Do you agree?
Well, Mr. Newsflash, Canadians teach a pro-Canadian story and have for a very long period of time. And that story necessarily, or perhaps covertly, very overtly talks about Indigenous peoples as being irrelevant to the formation of the country in the way of the great march towards Canadian independence and sovereignty. And then, of course, that just fits into that the Indigenous peoples don't matter. And that's always been the story of Canada. The Canadian law is built on the Royal Proclamation, where the King said everything is mine, and then Canadian law rolls out from that moment. Even previous to that, the papal bulls, the Pope saying that non-Christians don't matter and their rights don't matter, their land claims don't matter. So all of that is true. All of that has happened over and continues to happen in subsequent periods of Canadian history. So I'm not surprised at all. But here's the message for Canadians. You don't get to cherry pick history. Canada is a great place, has tremendous wealth, has beautiful cities, roads, laws, and policies. All of that is because of Indigenous peoples. And on top of that, when Canadian law then asserted itself, it removed Indigenous peoples from the equation, both in textbooks, but then also in policy and practice. And you have to inherit that as well. Yes, you can say the good things about Canada, but you also have to inherit that Canada was brutal, continues to be brutal with Indigenous peoples, and the land is clearly absolutely stolen.
We're going to continue the talk over on the podcast about pipelines in Manitoba, but thanks to you both.
We got you.
You can also watch any of our Truth in Politics panels by visiting our APTN News YouTube page. A new episode of APTN Investigates airs this Saturday. We'll bring you a preview after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Muriel sent in a picture of her family pet, Thompson. She tells us Thompson is a year old and an absolute joy to have around. Thanks for sharing, Muriel. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 19 in Fredericton, 18 in Halifax. Showers and 9 in Kuujjuaq, 11 and cloudy in Nain. Sun's out and 20 in Montreal, sunny and 17 in Val-d'Or. Showers and 14 in Sault Ste. Marie. 20 under sunny skies in Ottawa. 15 with the sun out in Thunder Bay. 21 in Sioux Lookout. Sunny and 20 in God's Lake. 19 in Norway House. 25 in Winnipeg. 23 in Brandon and Dauphin. 24 in Regina. Cloudy, and 26 in Saskatoon. 21 with showers in Meadow Lake. 17 with rain in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, 24 in High Level. 19 in Fort Chipewyan. 20 with showers in Edmonton. 23 and rain in Lethbridge. 17 with rain in Vancouver. Showers, and 23 in Kamloops. 19 and rain in Prince George. 8 with showers in Dease Lake. 23 and sunny in Old Crow. 19 in Whitehorse. Sunny and 22 in Yellowknife. Sun's out, and 25 in Norman Wells. 3 in Sax Harbor. Showers, and 13 in Pawlatuck. 6 with rain in Whale Cove. Showers, and 12 in Arviette. -1 with snow in Resolute. +1 and snow in Igloolik. APTN Investigates is back this week with an all-new episode. Journalist Christopher Reed looks into the recent battle over LeMay Forest and the mystery surrounding unmarked graves at the site. Activists fought for months to protect the land from development before Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew stepped in at the 11th hour. Here's a preview.
St. Norbert, a distinct community on the south end of Winnipeg. The place where Louis Riel's dream of what Manitoba should be took shape. And this is a former orphanage and home for unwed mothers, Asile Richaud. The orphanage began in 1904 and stopped operating in 1948. But its impact is still being felt. Especially in these woods, the final resting place of an uncertain number of children, many of whom were likely Métis.
If you compare the numbers of children that died at the Asile Richaud, it is overwhelming.
Quite a few people were really wanting to see this land get protected and honored the way it should.
You can catch Cherished Woods, the fight for LeMay, airing this Saturday on APTN Investigates. We're all out of time here for your APTN National News for this Thursday. You can find more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy McGuitch. Thanks for being with us. Creason will be here at 1 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for your first look at the day's news. We'll see you back here tomorrow.